Welcome to Building Legendary Leaders, the podcast where leaders leave behind chaos and step into clarity. This is where real stories come alive with the struggles, breakthroughs, and lessons that shape the most effective executives today. Every episode delivers fresh insights you can apply to your own leadership journey. If you are ready to stop putting out fires and start leading with purpose, this is the place for you. Here is your host, Jim Saliba.
Welcome to Building Legendary Leaders. Today, we're going to be talking to someone who lives in the enterprise sales arena. Long cycles, oversized deals, and the constraint of trade-offs between velocity and precision. Lead sales organizations from zero revenue to 25 plus million dollars, navigating that complexity of hypergrowth. He leads leaders at scale, navigating the shift from the VP of sales to the CRO, operating rhythm and repeatable growth. Outside of work, he is ocean wired, kite surfing, sailing, surfing, bringing that same situational awareness to what he does and leads every day in uncertainty. Today, he's reshaping the future of leadership and sales as the CRO of Vhive. Please join me in welcoming Itai Karelic.
Thank you very much, Jim. It's great that you're hosting me. It's great to be here. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak a little bit about my experience.
We're happy to have you here. We're looking forward to this conversation. I want to remind everybody that this is a community. If you know someone, a leader who would benefit from this, send it along to them. And if you like what you're hearing, why don't you just hit that subscribe button and you will not miss a session. But today, we're going to talk about the muscle memory mirage leading into hyper growth. And here's how we're going to break it down for today. There's tension between the outdated playbooks and what's happening today in rapidly scaling startups. We're going to dissect that crucial inflection points, pivoting between his leadership style and avoiding stagnation. The architect of a framework for identifying that muscle memory when it becomes a liability, not an asset. And we're going to talk about navigating the challenges of managing and retaining leaders who struggle to adapt in an evolving market demands. And for those who stay to the end, Itai will tell us how to spot that exact moment where your old playbook expires and how to build the next one before growth stalls. Sounds like we have a lot to talk about today.
Yes, we do. We'll try to make it short, entertaining, and with good enough stories that people will find them valuable and relatable as well.
Well, all we have to do is have fun.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit when you realized a moment when your playbook in sales just wasn't working anymore.
There were a few such moments, but I can talk about the most recent one was actually this January. We were doing our business kickoff. We had sales operations, product, and a number, and the rest of the executive team in one place. So about 50 of us, and there was a moment I was standing. I was running a session, and there was just before that session, we had a lighthearted half-hour session of war stories from the beginning of the life of Vhive, and it was basically pictures of me and the two founders flying drones, being in the field, and just hacking through and meeting first customers. When we first started, the most important thing was to prove the technology actually worked. We had our proposition of multi-drone, and some of the other things we did was innovative. And the first thing people were curious were like, I want to see that it actually works. And one of our first demos was for, at the time, Union Pacific had a drone program, the big railway company. And I said, well, I could do XYZ for you. And the guy, and I told him, sight unseen, just tell me where to be and I'll do that without any prep. And he said, you know what, you got it. Be here, come, I'll see you in 2 weeks. We'll do the full demo. And I demoed, and obviously it developed into a relationship until they canceled the drone program. But that's a different story. The thing was, we always had to prove the technology worked. And up until very recently, what we always did was, hey, there's a POV. Prior to the POV, there must be a demo. The customer needs to see the technology works. And then I realized I have some of the biggest brand names in the world. The technology obviously works. There's no need for this extra step that only takes extra days and sometimes extra weeks until you get the permits and the NDAs and all of that. No, no. Let's talk about value and business and workflows and how much money I can save you. I'm happy to talk about commercials and only then do a more significant POV that shows the value of what I'm bringing, not whether the technology works or not. And as I was standing in front, just after that, we had the down memory lane. We saw all these videos and funny pictures and stuff like that. And as we were talking about the process and how to improve it, it just suddenly dawned on me, this is a completely useless process that is muscle memory of that was the only way to sell. That was the only way to convince big enterprise. My guys don't need it anymore. There's absolutely no reason to do that. So this was something very recent, and we changed the playbook and we changed the steps that we take when we acquire a customer. I don't need to demo. The system obviously works. What I do need to demonstrate is with the digital information that I provide, how much value I can provide to you. And that's a completely different concept.
So you started off with, I have to prove that this works and the technology is there. But very recently, you realized I don't need to do that anymore. They wouldn't even be here if they didn't think it would work.
Correct. And if they need any proof that it actually works, look at all the PRs and all the customers I already have. There's enough of attraction that I don't need to prove that it works. I do need to prove that it will provide value to you. That's a completely different discussion.
So now that's a different discussion. Was your team up for this change?
Yeah, of course, immediately. It just made because the nice thing about kickoffs or offsites is that everybody's much more open, receptive to okay, this is the beginning of the year. We want to have a kick-ass year. Let's see how we can do better. The whole idea behind a kickoff is that it's forget what happened last year, except important lessons learned. How do we make this a year great again? And so yes, everybody was receptive, including the two founders. They're like, yeah, of course, makes sense. I mean, we had to prove it worked. Now we don't have to. So it's everybody was very receptive, and in a 12 to 18 month sales cycle, everybody's happy to shave off 2 to 3 months. So
So so how did you change the framework? How did you take that muscle memory and decide, "Hey, it's gonna become a liability if we keep this"?
well, we're small enough, when you're at a company of about 100 people, you're always small enough that you can take a decision and say, okay, from now on, it's no longer a part of the process. I think the most important thing is for leadership to realize something is wrong. I need to change it and change it. And that comes from two things, either your realization or if somebody comes to you and said, I think we can do something different. Anybody in the organization, listen to what they have to say. And if you agree with them, it's your job then to map out what the new process should look like, what the new vision is like. Well, the vision first and then the process, and implement it. But it's fairly easy. I mean, I have a team just under 20 people. The company as a whole is about 100 people. So it's not very difficult to implement. We're still not at the size that bureaucracy is an issue.
When does that become an issue?
I it's difficult to say. I don't know. I think so. We do have processes we've implemented. Obviously, when your customers are Verizon and Deutsche Telekom and the likes, you need internal processes that are robust, but you also need to be able to take decisions quickly. So again, if somebody says, "Well, something's wrong with the process," all they have to do is come to me for authorization. I do think that we will reach that point. We're not there yet. Probably when you require a matrix of decision makers to really make a decision, that I think is when issues start arising. So again, it's also at this point Both sales and operations are critical for decision making in deployment, but it's fairly easy to coordinate that because the decisions are made by myself and the COO. And with long enough sales processes, we have enough of a lead time that I know what he's going to think, so I can move forward quickly. I think as the pipeline becomes bigger and bigger, and we enter more and more verticals, and there's more people reporting, at that point we will have to implement processes that are not going just to be a phone call away and say, "Hey, Ty, are you free? Yes, I got this issue. How do you resolve it?" And the resolution comes within, if not an hour, 24 hours.
So we talked a little bit about you realized what you were doing before isn't going to work anymore. We have to change. What would have been the specific cost if you had clung to what you did before, to that muscle memory?
An extra 2 to 3 months in the process, right? It's first of all showing the customer the technology works, and then doing a POV instead of spending all the time on. So again, it's time to revenue, and I think it's very important to realize nobody gives you back your time in life. That's of course that's the most important thing, but time to revenue is critical because if I close a $5 million deal, if I close it 3 months ahead of time, those 3 months, nobody's going to give them back also in terms of revenue. It's the same amount, but it comes sooner. And I'm not even talking about classic economics of the time value of money. It literally is improves your forecast, etc. So I think the more you shorten the sales cycle, and the more it's that simple. It's not more complicated than that. And everything we can do to shave off weeks or months from a sales cycle when you have 12 to 18 months to close large deals, it's critical.
So you're going to be changing how you do things.
We changed it already, like within an hour. So basically, I said, okay, implement that in Salesforce. Everybody forget about that. We don't do demos anymore. There's no need for that.
Okay. And how do you do other strategies? Do you experiment? Do you try things out? How does that work?
So I know what works for me, but everybody that works for me is a very experienced salesperson. Both some were already managers, but everybody's an individual contributor now, and they have to deal with very high levels of executives at massive companies, but also the people that are on the operations side and actually do the work. And whatever they come up with, whenever they come up with a suggestion, I tell them convince me, and they don't. It doesn't take much to convince me, and I say, okay, you got a quarter to try it. So, for example, I was never a believer in SDRs for enterprise sales. I don't think it works. Nobody's going to call the head of networks at AT&T and say, "Hey, would you like to try digitization?" They're just you're destroying your brand name. We've all seen what the plethora of horrible messages I get on LinkedIn of people that sell me something that's completely irrelevant. But I said, you know what? If you find the right SDR and it works for you, great. You have a quarter to try. Give me a budget. I'll approve it. And I did. And we tried it both in APAC and in EMEA. Unfortunately, it didn't work. And I never say, I told you so, because that's not the point. Is I would like to be proven wrong. There's a reason why I never tried it, but I would like to be proven wrong. And so SDR was one example. One that two different sales directors requested. We gave them budget, didn't work out. Another one that did work out was working through system integrators. The problem with system integrators is you're now selling to two enterprises. One is, let's say, the Accentures of the world, which is a massive enterprise that takes its own sweet time, and then the Vodafones of the world, which so now everybody takes their own sweet time. And I was very afraid of doubling the sales cycle, even though now you have somebody that has the confidence of the end customer. But we found a sweet spot and a playbook on how to work with SIs in certain regions on certain deals. And originally I was against it, but again I said, convince me that I'm wrong. And we were able to refine it with my skepticism. And I have to say, in some cases, on some deals, it has accelerated the deal. Now it has its own complexities because now we have two big organizations working with you. But for sure, it was better than not working with the system integrator. So there's sometimes that they come up with suggestions and they work, and sometimes they come up with suggestions and they don't work. But we always give it time, we at least a quarter, and we always assign budget, and we always give it our best. I'm not there to prove them wrong. I'm there to say, okay, I'll help you push 100%, but we have to abandon it at the point that it doesn't work.
I love the word experiment versus a pilot or we're going to try this because it adds that whole scientific piece to it. which kind of starts with a hypothesis. I think if I do this, I'm going to get that. One of the big things I love that you brought up in this experiment or the way you experiment that a lot of people forget about is putting a timeline to it. This is it. This is done. I can't tell you how many times I'm talking to leaders and 6 months later, I'll ask, "Well, what happened with that?" "Oh, I don't know. We did 20 different things at the same time. I don't know what did what." And that learning that you could have gotten from that, whether it worked or not, is gone. That effort is a tax.
100%. And if you experiment too much with too many variables, like in any scientific experiment, uh, causation or causality, or you can tell if what caused what. And so that's, I think you have to be very methodical and you have to put a timeline. And I think in enterprise sales and long sales cycles, in any event, you have to put a timeline on everything, on in your forecasting, in your experimentation, also in how much you're willing to tolerate the shenanigans of a customer. You just got to be able to say no. They're let some. I have limited resources. Okay, just abandon the deal. Go for the ones that are. Yes, you put 6 months. It's a sunk cost. Number one lesson in accounting is true for so many other things. It's just a sunk cost. You've worked on it. You have other things in your pipeline. Don't invest more into this.
So you're talking about sunk costs. So there's a need for your consistent performance to move things through the pipeline. Yet you want to experiment at the same time. How do you develop a way to balance those 2?
I think it's the 80/20. It's mostly this is a process that worked for us. This is what works. You're gonna have to follow it. This is the timeline to close the deal. And I can get into it a little bit later, but we have our own, let's call it a system, a souped up medic that includes a timeline as well. And I can talk about its development. But I want to see that the customer transitions from step to step, and we actually have momentum. And then you have your 20% of the time try to experiment with this market that we didn't think it would work, with this system integrator that we might didn't think it would work, with this different approach, uh, selling only part of our solution just to get an entry, and hopefully that smaller contract turns into a bigger one, rather than start with the most important piece of what we sell. So there's different approaches. 80% has to be what the bread and butter, and because it works, and the other 20% is where you try things, and you can try things on critical customers. You don't have to try things just on the peripheral customers, but know what you're doing and know why you're doing it, why it's different, and what is the expected outcome. And of course, it was discussed when. By when do you change tack or change approach?
The part that I 100% agree with, well, I agree with everything you just said, but that understanding what I expect, understanding what I'm looking for, understanding what I'm trying, and not losing track of that over the time period is a mistake that I constantly see happen.
Yes, and we have a system to follow up on everything that happens, because when you're responsible for 7 to 10 deals, let's say even 7 deals with large telecom or energy enterprises, and it's going to take 12 months, and there's about 5 people. Yeah, you have 2 champions and 5 people, critical people, and then another 10 people in each one. Now you have to manage an excess of 250 contacts that are important to you, and some are critical. If you don't follow up with a system on everything that happened, and you're not able to report it every 2 weeks, then you're going to lose track. And all you say, yeah, yeah, I spoke to my champion. And yes, I spoke to the economic decision maker. And yes, the value was established. And yes, all these great things that all these sales. But when? When is it going to close? What are the steps that are required to close over this very long horizon? So you have to be able to follow up um, on or establish a timeline for everything you do.
So, one of the things that we talked about in a previous conversation, in tech right now, there happens to be a lot of different layoffs going on, and you had to have done some layoffs as well. This is This is an issue that many leaders have to go through. It's not easy, it's hard decisions. And what you brought up to me was a concept of a trust tax of the people who stay. Tell me a little bit about your feeling around that.
So I think for sales, it's actually easier to hire and fire. You hire people that you believe will deliver, and if people don't meet their quota, it is what it is. You're no hard feelings. If they have hard feelings, great. It's bad on them, not on me. But I we've established we've established a target. We've established a timeline for that target, and you're not close to it. There's not much I can do. It's and and I think the issue is, especially with leadership, is the trust talk comes twice. A, when you introduce somebody external, a sales leader, and people were either expecting a promotion, or not even if they expected a promotion, they're used to talking to me. Now there's a middle layer, and but I like talking to you. You hired me. We succeeded together. Why is there somebody in the middle? And the trust tax is, trust me, this will be better for you. You will have more access to somebody more, maybe not as senior as I am, but you have more time to brainstorm and attack your customers or your potential customers, because somebody will be there and will be more available. Whereas I have people from Australia to Chile. There's only a limited amount of time that I can provide to everybody. So that's number one. And then when people are let go, is, well, you brought them in. Why did you bring them in? What were the decisions behind letting them go? Because by then, either people do get attached or not, at least from a personal perspective. And there's also the issue of, well, if they were let go and they were my boss and I didn't reach my target, what does it say about me? And and you have to alleviate that fear. Either let go of everybody that want to let go, or if you let go of leadership, say your job is currently safe because you report to me. I have no intention of you failing. You're going to reach your target, otherwise I failed. It's taking responsibility. And once you take responsibility on telling them, when you hire somebody, trust me, this will be better for you, and these are the reasons, or trust me, the fact that your boss was let go means I'm your boss, and if you fail, it means I failed. I take responsibility. It helps people say, okay, I'm committed. I'm as committed to the cause as I was before, and I'll get the support that I need to be able to execute and reach my target.
So, can you tell us a story about where that might not have worked as well as you planned?
There's a reason why salespeople have a reputation, myself included. Um, I'll start with a funny story about perceived general intelligence of salespeople, which is, and again, this goes back to the old demo days. My first telecom customers, SBA, it doesn't matter. I was the VP of operations, and we go out to site to see that it actually works. It's a team of 5 or 7 people, quality, operations, whatever. And I press a button, the drone flies out, and everything works fine. And he just looks at me and goes, "So simple that even a salesperson can do it." And I was like, "Yeah, that's because there were no Texas. It was just me, right?" As the old war story. And it's a funny story, but I think the issue with salespeople is not whether general intelligence or not; it's the single-mindedness. And so I would say I took a slightly different route in answering your question. I will answer it, but I think where things don't work is a good salesperson um, made you recruit them because they sold themselves, and then you realize the goods were not what you were expecting. And so now it's such a long sales process. It takes you at least 2 quarters to realize this is not going to get anywhere. And so I think it was more where things didn't work out. It was personality wise, where they were very good at convincing that they can deliver on something that they would never be able to deliver upon. And I think it's a problem that every sales leader has. By nature, they're good salespeople. They got to where they are. I mean, they might not be as good as what you need, but they were good enough to convince you. So I think where things didn't work out were blind spots that I had in recruiting, rather than generality. Rather than anything. I think that generality of salespeople not being able to perform is true for any sales leader. And it was, if I want to make a specific thing that I took out of and changed, again, goes back to forecasting. We changed our forecast to, so I took a playbook from sorry, I'll go from what didn't work to how I now evaluate it better. But I what I said is, I can't wait 6 months until I realize where somebody's going to get there or not. And I can't, yes, we've met with the decision maker and the economic buyer and procurement, and we were onboarded and all, but I don't feel like something is moving. And what we did, I took the playbook of R&D, and R&D, or we work in sprints. I mean, there's different ways that R&D teams work, but one of the most in startups is working in sprints. So every 2 weeks is a sprint, and some features require 6 sprints, and some features require only 1 sprint. And it's the same for us. Contract negotiations are going to require about 3 months. That's the reality, to sign an MSA with the likes of Deutsche Telekom. Okay, so now you need your 6 or 8 sprints, however much you need. And it's difficult within that period to assess where you're at. But at the end of the 3 months, where are you? Do I even have a draft? And if I don't have a draft, you're 3 months behind, Mr. Salesperson. You're not even close to what you're supposed to deliver. And the promises you made are not going to happen. Given the fact that there are some sprints that are 2 weeks, then I can assess better within a quarter whether what you promised me would work or not. And I can help them either be better salespeople or not be part of the organization.
So you mentioned playbook a number of times, and you're changing your playbook as things happen. How can people understand when their playbook really isn't working anymore before it takes too long and growth stalls?
I'll say something that is true for everybody in every role, in every tech, actually in every company in the world now, which is, if you don't feel the ground shifting underneath your feet because of AI, you're about to drown. I mean, there's going to be an earthquake and you're going to disappear. It means you have your eyes closed. So I think everybody's in that panic mode or FOMO mode or whatever mode, but you have to question almost daily what's going on. Now, don't have too much FOMO, because there's a lot of stories and LinkedIn, and people say, "Oh, I've automated everything." It takes some time to automate everything, but just think to yourself where I would use an analogy. Okay, I would use an analogy, and I use it myself. If 3 years ago, OpenAI unleashed ChatGPT upon the world, and since then, most people switch to Claude or Gemini or whatever. But there's now a number of alternatives, both for enterprise and for the consumer. And if you think about the evolution of what these tools do, and how every 3 months you're changing your how I write my LinkedIn posts, and how I do my research, and how I do my forecasting, and how I do my spreadsheets, and now how I do my presentations, and everything, and how I do the images, and Nabu no Banana, it's every 3 months. Well, if you use AI every 3 months differently, it means everybody else is using it differently. And now you have to assess, what do I have to do differently? And we are forced now, as tech leaders, actually as leaders in any industry, to reassess where we are and what we need to do. And I think it's a generality, or it's a general thing about the world. I don't know that I mean, I think I'll send my kids to college. They're high schoolers, but who knows, 2-3 years from now, what would be the value of higher education? And it's every sacred cow must be slaughtered at this point, to use that term. So this is a general statement. I think everybody should fear how the ground is shifting, and and find the right path, because that right stable path will be the opportunity to be the biggest and the best. And specifically to your question, which is, again, in a long sales cycle, just figure out, first of all, is this deal stalled? And I now have sprints, and I can tell if this deal stalled. And now, if I have 4 deals stalled in a region, is it the sales director, or is it that the region is going through an economic crisis, right? What are the externalities, and what is it the sales director? And if there are externalities, might not even need that sales director there, because I can't sell for the next year. But be able to measure where you're supposed to be on the process. And if you're not there, on a consistent basis, make the change you need. And if you're not there in 1 deal out of 5, well, it happens. So I think you just have to evaluate the data every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, where am I on this 18-month journey to get this deal to 2 or 3 or 5 million dollars.
So you're using R&D's 2-week sprint as a rhythm, as a cadence every single time. We use it as a feedback loop. You're using it as a check-in.
Correct. As a check-in, we were supposed to have finished the workflow mapping for automation on March 1st. Are we there yet? Well, we're delayed by 2 weeks. Great. It actually means the deal is on track because 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there, nobody cares. No, we're 3 months behind. This is very worrying. We're 4 or 5 months behind. This deal either dead or we're going to have to do something very dramatic, Mr. Sales Director. So yes, you got to check up on these things. And once you check every 2 weeks, it puts people on their toes. It's not enough in enterprise sales, as far as I'm concerned, to have another conversation with procurement, with the economic buyer, and with the decision maker. That that doesn't alleviate my concerns. Is did we move along the process of everything that we know? Workflow automation, API integration, IT security, local storage. There's all these things that I know need to happen, and if they're not happening, some of them in parallel, this deal will not close.
This is a great conversation. We could talk about it all day.
No, I don't want to bore people. Yes.
No, I don't think so. Um, I want to get a little personal. Before you answer, where you grew up, most people talk about college. I'm going to challenge you a bit and go further back. Tell us about where you grew up.
So I grew up mostly in Israel. I lived a little bit in Spain as a teenager, but I grew up mostly in Israel. I grew up in Tel Aviv, and yeah, born in '76, so '80s kid basically, and grew up not far from the beach. I My skin still pays the price because I remember the first time we had a sunscreen, with number 8 sunscreen. It was like, oh wow, number 8. Just have to put it once a day. I don't need more than that. And then you realize what damage it is for a fair skinned person to be in the Middle East sun all the time at the beach because you're either sailing or surfing. So yeah, so I grew up in Tel Aviv most of the my youth. Joined the Navy. I was a commander of a gunship, or basically a patrol boat in the Israeli Navy. Left as captain, and then yeah, I would say if people speak a lot about college, that I would say those were my formative years. Right, that teaches you a lot about what you need in terms of leadership, handling situations under pressure, etc. Obviously, it's significantly different than a work environment or a college environment. And then real adult life starts, right? And I moved to the UK after a while for work, and since then was moved back to Israel, but at the end found myself in the United States about 20 years ago, and I've been in New York ever since.
So you lived by the ocean growing up. Is this how you grew your love for surfing, sailing?
Yes, I mean it's I think, yeah, it's even my high school was, you could see the beach was about 100 yards from the beach. I was the most truant kid in my high school, and I asked myself once, "You built a high school by the beach. What did you think would happen? We would not leave. Every time you see the waves, like, all right, I'll just go and pick up my board and leave." So yeah, I think people either connect with the ocean or not, regardless of where they live. Not everybody that grew up in Israel is as connected to the ocean. I just For me, it's the nice thing about the ocean. Let's take New York City, right? It has Rockaway and a few other beaches, and the great thing is, as soon as you're either surfing, which is only about 100 yards away, but definitely kite surfing, where you could be a mile or 2 or 3 miles away. As soon as you're there, you're already in nature. You've just left the city. It didn't take much. You didn't have to drive far for hiking, etc. And there's this sense of you're in nature, and the power of the ocean, which obviously we all know is can be significant, just cleans up your soul, your body and soul. I would put it that way.
I love that. I grew up in New York myself, out on Long Island. The beaches are just the smell of the ocean as we drive closer to the beach changes my mood, my what I think, and yes, it clears my head and I can just relax and let other things go. So, what values have you learned as a child, maybe surfing, that you use today?
Surfing actually would not be a good example, but there are other things. I think I was a very curious child, so truant or no truant, I was a little bit wild, and that distinction of being the most truant kid in high school was true. But I also was very curious, and I remember the day my father, I asked for the youth encyclopedia, so they bought the youth encyclopedia, and I literally started in A, and over the years ended up in Z. Obviously, I didn't read it all cover to cover, but I every section I and just this thirst of knowledge and understanding the world around me and why things operate the way they are. I remember looking at the drawings of that one stymie of molecules, specifically organic molecules, and I couldn't understand anything. No matter how much I read, I had no chemistry background. I think I was in fifth grade or something like that to understand. But and I still, those pictures still haunt me of complex carbon-based molecules. But it's I think curiosity is critical. I am very curious. I was able to work in true R&D companies, both in the energy space and understand the R&D behind it. And I think that curiosity is critical. I don't think you can be a good leader in tech if you don't understand the tech very, very well. And I think I understand it pretty well, even very well. I think the other thing is that I didn't realize about myself until later in life is that I deal very well with uncertainty. I'm not phased by it. And the last one is that which is connected to it, which is I'm fairly optimistic. I don't think you can be an entrepreneur unless you're optimistic. Most startups fail, and I have in my background, I have 3 startups that failed, and yet I joined ones afterwards and never wanted to work for corporate. And I think this you should be cautiously optimistic. Don't be stupid. But unless you're optimistic and you deal well with uncertainty, I don't think you'll do well in sales in general and in tech specifically, and definitely not with the uncertainty of today's world. Even rattles me. I'll put it that way. Yeah, the pace of change is absolutely astounding.
I only have a couple questions left for you. One is, if a leader was listening to this, what is the one thing you want them to really get from it? Something that they can use when they go back to work on Monday morning.
I'll answer it in 2 parts. The first one is if you are in enterprise sales and you have long sales cycles, put a timeline on everything, break down the tasks, and force people to map it out for themselves and for you, and be accountable for when these tasks have to happen, because otherwise the process it will be prolonged forever and you don't have a good grip on it. I think that's very important, and it's something that's missing. I don't see it. I don't see it a lot of. I don't see many people using it. I think they always go back to, well, I spoke to the decision maker and the economic buyer, and I know I harped over it in the conversation, but I really think it's a differentiator. In general, a leader, I think, is nothing's ever good enough. I use that sentence. Nothing's ever good enough. Do not use it in your personal life. Whatever your kids do, sometimes it's good enough, sometimes it's not. Praise them when they need praise and tell them it's not good enough when it's not. But be very careful not to use it in your personal life. And I don't use it very often in my personal life. But at work, I think nothing's ever good enough is the right approach.
So, Itai, this was a fabulous conversation.
Thank you.
How can people get a hold of you? How could they reach you if they have questions?
The nice thing is that if you will search up my name, I am literally the only person in the world with this first and last name. So you're going to find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy for you to search me on LinkedIn. You'll see my email also on our company website, vhive.ai. Fairly easy to reach. If people want to reference this conversation and say, hey, I heard you on the podcast, I'd like to learn more. I'd like to be in touch. I'm happy to be in touch in LinkedIn. And if there's anything that they want to hear more and want to schedule some time, I'm always open to talk to interesting people. But they should come up with interesting questions as well.
That's really good advice. Curiosity, interesting questions, it's a great takeaway. Um, this has been a great show. Thank you very much. Thank you for everybody for listening to Building Legendary Leaders.
Thank you, Jim.
Building Legendary Leaders podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.